All right, guys. Inappropriate Earl is back in the house. You know the type of guest I seek out. My favorite musicians and actors, pro wrestlers. We've had some good ones. Stephen Piercy from Rat, Fred Corey from Cinderella, Joey Allen from Warrant. We've had Nita Strauss from Alice Cooper. And today I am incredibly humbled and honored to have one of my favorite singers from back in the day. He was in a band called Wild Side, formerly known as Young Guns. And they, I think, in my opinion, fall into that category of bands that should have been much bigger, along with Shark Island. Where Are You, Richard Black? You're next on my hit list. Might have trouble. I think I'll have an easier time getting Vinnie Vincent than Richard Black. But today's guest, his name is Drew Rose, but you might know him a little better from the Wild Side days as Drew Hanna. Mr. Rose, thank you for coming.
Hey there, Earl. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
No, it's I was am a huge fan of Wild Side. 1992, Under the Influence, Andy Johns. I mean, you guys had incredible momentum with that album.
We did. I thought things would be a lot different than they are, but that's the way it goes, I guess.
I mean, Paul Stanley co-wrote a song.
Yep.
You know, Clock Strikes 12, if I'm not mistaken.
You're correct. Yeah, Paul wrote a song. We had some hit songwriters involved.
Jim Valance.
We actually wrote a song that didn't make the record. Actually, we retooled a song that didn't make the record that was written by Wes Arkeen and Axl Rose that we were slated to add to the record after we reworked it. But so, yeah, we had an opportunity to work with a lot of great musicians.
Now, 1992, kind of a transitional period in the definitely the LA music world. I mean, you had bands, Guns N' Roses was, although they'd been around for a few years, I think that was around the Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 albums. And, grunge was kind of starting to pop out, Nirvana. What was it like to be a glam band and not necessarily see the end coming, but going, wow, we're glam and what's happening is not glam?
Yeah. Oh my God, I've told this story and I relive it in my mind so many times. It was a really exciting moment for us around 1988. We wrote the right songs, got the big record deal. We were being courted by the label as if we were going to be the next big thing. Recorded up at Eddie Van Halen's house. We recorded at A&M Studios. Tons of money being thrown at us from all sides. And of course, all of a sudden we had business managers and accountants and all the assholes, I guess you could say, that came, into play. And we were starting to act like something really big was going to happen. And it took a really long time to get that record recorded. There were a lot of issues involved. And I think ultimately it just sat for quite a while before we got a chance to get it out. It was in the can, early 91, I believe. I'm trying to remember. It's been so long. And it sat for almost a year just because they were trying to time things. And of course, as you know, that was a crucial year in waiting for our music to come out, where radio was already making a massive change with the kinds of records they were playing, and they were being told by all the labels to play this new band and play this new band. They were all coming out of the Northwest, and so by the time we launched, it was a tough road for us. We got out there, we played constantly, 2 years straight, just on the road touring, working the radio stations, picking up more and more stations. But at the end of the day, the label was just done. And we were sort of burned out on that, not getting the support from them that we hoped for. And it was super disappointing. And ultimately, what happens is you start with infighting, accusing each other of things on the road. drugs, crazy amounts of drugs, because depression sets in. Everybody's thinking this is it. Now what? And you got to go back to the drawing board. And it was a really, really tough thing to try and do. And that's where things started to fall apart internally. And I think when the lead guitar player and my main songwriter, opposite me, Brent Woods, we just weren't getting along, and for all the wrong reasons, but we weren't getting along anymore. And we just parted ways, and that's when everything fell apart, really. Right.
And then I think he ended up later with Vince Neil's band.
It wasn't long before Vince picked him up, because he's an amazing, talented musician, and he's on the road right now with Sebastian Bach, playing guitar for him. So he's probably the only one out of all of us who's survived the music business and managed to sustain it for as long as he has.
Because I think in like 91, 92, Vince Neil's album Exposed with, I think, Steve Stevens and Dave Marshall on guitar. That was a really good album. It was on MTV a lot. So, I mean, the scene wasn't completely dead yet.
No.
But...
Well, Vince Neil... Motley Crue, and the following was massive. So wherever Vince went, the crowd was there. But a young band like us, it was just really hard to break through. And we were starting to play larger venues through the Midwest, 3,000, 6,000, 8,000. It was starting to happen. But it was also starting to close up in key parts of the country, like the East Coast. Forget the West Coast except for LA, and those are areas where there's huge market shares, and we just couldn't get anywhere with those radio stations.
Do you think there was? I know Nirvana's "Smells Like Teenage Spirit" kind of gets the credit for. Okay, you had the Cherry Pie video with Warrant, and then you had Nirvana's video. It was like, oh wow, was there a band, a video, or do you think there was a particular moment in time where it was like, it's over? Not necessarily for you guys, but for the genre overall.
It just was the flood. Once they figured it out that this kind of depressing, kill yourself, do heroin kind of music was picking up everywhere, and the sales were starting to really jump. America needed something different. Party rock had seen its end, and at least run its course for the moment. I'm not so sure that how many times can you write about these chicks and cars and more chicks and cars, man? So at
not enough.
Point, I love it, and I listen to it every day. Still, some of my favorite music, and I'm 50, so I still get down with this stuff all the time, and I don't put on Nirvana or any of that kind of stuff. Although listening to it now, I recognize how amazing some of the songwriting is and some of the ways that those songs are put together. But forget Nirvana for a minute, and let's start talking about all the other ones that came in behind them. There were, just like the party rock bands, there were hundreds of them, and some of them got really big, and some of them had a moment in time, just like, we did. And some of them, and most of them are all gone. Where are they? They're all, can you think of like 5 of them right now that were as big as Nirvana? Maybe 5, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam,
Alice in Chains, although,
it's a little different these days, but, and again, I was a huge Alice in Chains fan, huge. They were somewhere on the line of both sides of that, because of the way that their heavy sound, But all that stuff went away too, pretty quick. Actually, it didn't even last a decade.
Well, I think the boy bands kind of killed them. The Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, who I kind of almost thought were glam bands in their own. I went to a Backstreet Boys concert, and it was one of the better concerts I've ever been to.
Great hooks, great melodies, lots of fun music, and the girls were there, man.
Yeah, I was the oldest guy in the arena by 25 years, so I felt like Sandusky running around the Allstate Arena. But
that's great.
I'm a sucker for those Desmond Child, type of songs.
Yeah, me too.
Now, did you guys ever come close to writing with Desmond Child? Because he seemed to put his footprint on a lot of bands.
No, there was talk about who to write with, and we were always scratching our heads more like, why are we writing with anyone? I mean, I kind of prepared for some of these questions and thinking about them ahead of time. And, you know, the thing with the songwriting part of it, you know, we always wrote about our experiences. We were a Hollywood band. We lived in Hollywood. And so a lot of the stuff you hear on the record is Hollywood based stuff, you know, things that were happening to us at the moment. And you can hear those songs on that record, and they just, to me, they sound better because when we performed them, when we recorded them, and I sang them, quite frankly, there was a real passion for what I was singing about because it was an experience in my life at one point or another. Maybe a little bit of paraphrasing in some of those songs, but it was all there. When we started to write with some of these outsiders because the label felt we weren't quite there yet, we didn't really understand that. It was we thought they signed us because we had great songs, and now all of a sudden they're changing us. And I'll never forget that I had a meeting with A&R executive Tim Devine at the time, who signed us to Capitol, and he probably wouldn't remember this, but there was a comment made to one of the other execs while I was standing just outside of his office, and I heard him say, "Yeah, this is our Warrant. This is our Slaughter. This is our Skid Row." And it bugged me so much because as I appreciated what those guys did and the sound that they had, I certainly didn't compare us to that in you know, but I guess that's how the music business sort of worked. You know, they were all out there looking for that angle that sounded like this guy or that guy, obviously, and a bit naive, I guess you could say, to the music business rather than just the music, you know?
I mean, because to me, that's just as a fan, you know, what killed the genre wasn't grunge or it was just the copycat bands. Like you had like Rat was popular, and then you had bands that sounded like Rat and looked like Rat, and then you had bands that sounded like the bands who looked like Rat, and you know, then you had Cinderella, and then you had Britney Fox, and then I mean, am I right or wrong in that? Like you know, it's like with any genre, what killed grunge was, you know, the Pearl Jam sound alike bands, or is it just kids grow up and want to listen to new stuff?
I think it's a bit of both, but absolutely the sound alikes, lookalikes, and I guess you like you say, copycat groups. It's just overkill. It's too much. It's saturation. I don't see so much of that going on today because people are. We were talking about this earlier with the internet and everything. There's just, you can listen to music from all over the world, and people get into so many different ways to listen to music that it's not like you have the radio that you're stuck with, you know, or what was one time MTV. You know, you were being programmed to listen to music a certain way back then. And that's another thing, is MTV was a big, you know, game changer for a lot of these kinds of bands like us. You know, if you got your chick video onto MTV, man, that was it. You were instant success. And I remember I flew to New York with management to meet with all these people at MTV, and the discussion about getting us on and when it was going to happen, how it was going to happen, all this, you know, and they wanted us to make a music video for one of our softer ballad style songs.
Which one? Just Another Night?
Yeah, that was the one that everybody from radio to all the way through, and we were stubborn. And again, this is a naive move by a young band who felt like there was some integrity to the music rather than just sell out. You know, and when I say naive, because naive to the business, you know, and we didn't understand that the label, MTV, all the people involved that wanted to make money or figure out a way to have success with this thing needed they needed an instant hit, an instant success, no growth. And I grew up with album music. I would sit and listen to album tracks long before I ever listened to anything that was popular on the radio. So we wanted the album to build. We wanted to release songs like Hang On Lucy and these harder edge songs that represented what the band was, and not just go for the big, sort of commercial radio song. And ultimately we fought and we won. And I think in the end we really lost, because everyone sort of went, they're not listening to us. They're not going to listen to us ever. Let's just kind of walk this way and let them do their thing. Things will burn out, and then we'll figure this out in the end. And we were on the road. I got a call from the label saying that, after a long time of touring, that it was probably time to come back and work on the next record. And we were only 2 tracks deep on radio. We were thinking at that point that Just Another Night was going to be the one that sent it home. And they were like, nah, we're not going to push that one. Just come home. We'll do a new record. And we were contracted to do at least a second record with them, but we were so frustrated with it, we walked away from the whole thing. Not, again, realizing that what we were really walking away from, we could have retooled a lot of things, thought about where music was going, and had that second shot, not knowing whether Capitol would ever have done anything the right way at the time. But we were stupid and walked away from a major record deal at the time.
Well, I mean, as a fan, I never thought that era would end. I mean, we were talking about it off the air. The Sunset Strip was just a party zone and like an ant farm of horny people. I mean, and I guess when you're in the middle of that area, like, this is never going away. And certainly the mid '90s were tough for glam bands. I mean, didn't you guys have an album come out in like '95?
Yeah, that was a big weird thing, because I had lost Brent and replaced him with another guitar player who I knew, a friend of the drummers at the time. He was in a band on Geffen called the Graveyard Train. I don't know much about them, but a guy named Bruce Draper, he kind of leans along the lines of a Jimmy Page blues guitar player rather than, what Brent Woods represented, which was exactly right up my alley. I just, every time Brent wrote a lick, I knew right where to go, and vice versa. And we were just really, really connected when we wrote together. And so trying to write with a guy who I didn't really understand and try to put a record together in a time when music was changing, we tried really hard ourselves to make some changes to the sound. It was probably a huge mistake, because that album is not even something I listen to that often. Although some of the songs are pretty cool, it's just not, it was just the wrong move to make, because our fans were expecting something more along the lines of what we did on the first record, and we couldn't not with that lineup, I couldn't put that together. So that was really the last nail on what I call the coffin there, because that was when we got slammed by any critics who were even willing to listen to the record at that point. And at that point, this was way into what was already over for Wildside or any of that kind of genre, I think. Let's face it, even the biggest bands were taking a hiatus. Huge,
Yeah.
Everybody was saying, let's sit back, see where this goes. Well, I'll resurface again when all these youngsters turn into old farts and they want to come back to the concerts again,
Yeah, no,
that's kind of what happened.
I think Piercy had left Rat and formed a band with Fred Corey, two former guests of Inappropriate Earl, and formed a band called Arcade.
Great band, great music, loved it.
I think right the year before you guys put out that album, '94, Arcade's first album was like, wow, this is really good. And I think it sold 20,000 copies. Yeah. And it could have been a Rat or Cinderella album. And it was just like, was it intimidating to see like someone with the success of a Piercy type go, okay, if he's not having success, what are we like?
Yeah, I went into, if you listen to the second record, and again, like I don't listen to that often, but I was listening to it maybe 2 weeks ago. I have it in my phone, and so it through Bluetooth, I was in the car and I just decided to listen to it, and I hadn't heard it in years, and I'm trying to put myself back there and what I wrote And oh man, I was going through some real depression, which was in perfect line for what all the other songs on the radio were about. So it didn't seem odd to me back then, but now, I mean, it's just, I can't imagine anybody who really liked Wild Side's first album, which great hooks, great songs, uplifting, nothing really depressing at all, real positive stuff. And then all of a sudden, wow, they go out and buy this and go, what the is this? This is like, so toss it out right away. But now, listening back to it, it was some interesting stuff, but not the greatest for me. I left the country trying desperately to run from myself. I couldn't get away from myself. I just kept going, and I went to Sydney and lived there for a while until my visa ran out. I just couldn't. We had traveled, and I wanted to go back to some of these places, and I just was in a really bad place and got back to the U.S. probably around the time that you're saying, like 96, maybe 97, and didn't really find myself in a music career anymore. I just felt like this was done. I was done with it.
Did you ever walk into a music meeting at that time and they would just look at you and go, "Oh, you're the singer from Wild Side. We're not really into that anymore"?
No, I guess I was too afraid for that, because there were opportunities to go. There were some labels out there that were putting out, we'll call them hairband style music, like
Nickelback. I mean, not that they're a hair band, but
well, even that's bigger in terms of the labels. There was label. I think Warrant wound up on this label called CMC Records, which is notorious right in that time that you're talking about, to put out all these, hey, you guys are great. We'll take your platinum and try to capitalize on your platinum success with something new. Even if it sold 200,000 or 100,000 records at the time, they would have been successful because they were given no upfront money. Go record your record and then, we'll see what we can do with you. And they were the king of all that stuff at the time. And I had meetings set up for possibly doing that, and all that kind of thing. And I just felt like didn't have the lineup, didn't have the people. I was done. I was burned out. And I certainly wasn't ready to go back out on the road again. We had a lot of drug problems on the road and things that I was trying to run away from. And I just didn't want to go back there again.
Well, because I know in 99, I guess the last grasp at, bringing that kind of music back into mainstream acceptance was John Kolodner. He started Portrait Records, and I think he did an album with Rat.
Dokken, I think, too, right?
I think Rat, Dokken, and Cinderella, but that album was never released. And, Piercy said that John Kolodner, who's, legendary, and, Boston, Aerosmith, tried to make Rat sound like the Cars. And,
I didn't hear that record. I just thought the whole thing was really weird. And that who would even give him the money and the green light to do something like that was really strange to me.
I mean, I'm guessing that his reputation in the music industry was so legendary, and maybe he can turn shit into gold again. I don't mean to say shit, but, maybe he can, because he was largely responsible for Aerosmith's resurgence. Yeah. And maybe the thinking was, well, if anyone can do it, John Kolodner can do it. But, unfortunately, it didn't really work out for any of those bands. And
where's John Kolodner?
I see him walking around my neighborhood all the time, and I've asked him to be on the podcast, and he gave me the same answer Ron Jeremy recently gave me, and which is a good segue.
Oh.
And
does John Kolodner still look like John Lennon?
Yes. He looks just like he did in the Dude Looks Like a Lady video, and I'm like, hey, Mr. Kolodner, I'm a huge fan. I love your work with Boston and Aerosmith, and I'd love to have you on my podcast. And he just looks at me and goes, what's a podcast? I'm like, all right, well, I'll see you later. I'll see you at Pavilions.
That's awesome.
And Ron Jeremy, the same thing, he's like the Robert De Niro of porn, I can only imagine this. I mean, he's been active in the porn business for 40 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, so since you were burnt out on the music business, you had to find another line of work.
I did. I went down, I followed I met this really beautiful girl at one of our very last shows we did in Las Vegas. And we didn't see each other for quite a while. But I was really into her. And all throughout the Wild Side touring and recording, I never really had a fixed girlfriend. I was the only one. Guys always dragging girls and wives with them. But I was the single guy, and I had a great time, and I never wanted to be tied down. And I had a really great experience not having anybody like that with me. Where all the other guys were on the phone, baby, I miss you, you know, while they're getting BJs and all this kind of crazy stuff.
You mean guys aren't faithful on the road?
Yeah, well, some of them are. I don't think the guys I was with were.
That's all right. Not naming names.
Not naming names. None of them are married to any of the same girls anyway anymore. So, but yeah, so I was a single guy, and I finally this whole music thing was kind of coming to a slowdown for me, and I pursued this woman, and she lived in New Orleans. So I went down to New Orleans to stay with her for a while. As I said, running from myself, anywhere but LA. And while I was down there, I kind of needed a job. Didn't have much going for myself. So I think that was the big transition where I cut my hair off, which was a big deal. And I remember sitting in the chair in the mall at the salon, and I cut all my hair off, and I asked the girl to give it to me in a bag. I wanted to take it with me because it was like such a big part of my life for so long. And anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. So
no, listen, people. This is why people want to hear this, you know, because I mean,
yeah, really, they want to hear about my hair in a bag.
Yeah,
Plastic
because
bag. I
you
kept
don't
that hair for a long time, and I used to pull it out and look at it, smell it, remember what it was like to have long hair. But I needed to get a job, and it was really hard to walk into somewhere and say, "Yeah, man, I've been a rocker for the last 15 years of my life, and I'd like to work here now." And I didn't want a job at Guitar Center or at a record store.
Or Johnny Guitars on Sunset.
Yeah, none of that. I wanted a real gig, man. I was used to real money, and I wanted something real. And so she turned me on to a friend who was working on a TV show. I got a job with a little bullshitting, working on a TV show for the USA Network. And
can you say what it was?
Yeah, it was called. It was horrible. It was called The Big Easy, which is a series based on the movie.
Okay.
There was a movie out at one point.
Matt Dillon was in it.
Yeah, I think so. And then so in the TV show, it was a cheap rendition, 1 hour or half hour, something like that. And I was working on that show for the entire season, you know. And then I was done with New Orleans. It was about a year, and I moved out of there, broke up with her, went back to LA, started getting involved on commercials, TV commercials, car commercials, doing whatever I could to make a living in the film business, and ended up with a job at Panavision in Hollywood, which is not far from here.
That's a big one.
I was a camera rep there for a while, learned those cameras inside and out, got a really good experience there. And I ran into somebody there who shoots adult films. And it was really interesting to me. I knew that I wasn't going to go shoot a movie anytime soon because there were too many roadblocks, and there was nobody I could turn to in order to become some sort of film producer or director. So, hey, porn seems easy enough. And you don't have to know anything. Let's figure this out. And, you know, together, me and this guy, he had a camera. I knew a couple of girls, and they were cool about not getting paid right away until we sold a few of our movies, and we started shooting porn. And so this buddy of mine, who's also in the film business, a lighting guy, we started a sound stage in North Hollywood. We opened a big warehouse, converted it, turned it into a film studio, specifically, primarily, mostly for porn. It took about a year before the industry opened their arms to us because they're a little standoffish.
Because you were new.
Who are these guys? We're not going to go there. We don't know. Are the cops going to show up? What's going on? You know, all that stuff. So, but after a while, lots of, persistence and doing our thing over there, we had a full-scale porn production house, renting lighting, building sets, editing, and producing our own films monthly. And it started to become a success, and I found a way to make some real money. And that was 1998, 99.
Oh, wow.
There. Yeah. So I have been successfully in the porn business for the entire time, and that's what I've been doing. I mean, I miss the music business a lot. I try to stay connected through some of the people I still know in it. I certainly pay attention to what's going on, although I couldn't tell you who anybody is today on any kind of popular music channels. But yeah, I've just had to stay really entrenched and focused and in order to be successful in the adult movie business, rather than just some guy with a camera. I've moved on to much bigger things since then.
Now, what do you think is a worse business in terms of the bullshit and the unfairness of it? Because I know music, much like comedy, is, you see some bands make it that shouldn't, some bands that don't should. Is porn have its own area of bullshit to deal with?
Oh, I think so, but certainly not in that. The porn business, since I got involved, was, again, 98, probably what I would call the end of the golden era of big money. The adult business, when it went from film to VHS, there was huge money in it, still huge money. And I was at the tail end of VHS when it finally went over to DVD. And just like the music business, when the DVD business moved on to the internet business, a lot of musicians will say, and I'm sure you've heard this a million times, we're all getting ripped off. Nobody's, free music everywhere, and nobody's getting paid and all this kind of crap. And I hear it all the time. And it's the same thing for the adult business. You just need to be able to be versatile, come up with ways to change the game a little bit. And in my case, I had that studio. It was difficult to keep running that business because I had neighboring businesses in an industrial area that didn't like what was happening. Girls running around the parking lot naked, and it was crazy. It was crazy. And very much like being on a tour bus, we ran that studio exactly the same way. I had an apartment upstairs, and it was all night, everything going on, and drugs and partying, and let's go shoot a movie at 4:00 in the morning with 5 girls who were staying over. And it was insanity. And we just burned out on it. And at the same time, I was lucky enough to, there's a lot of things in between, but I'll cut to the chase.
Listen, this isn't radio, baby. we have no time limits here. No commercial breaks. Just don't cut it.
Cutting.
Don't cut to the chase. Get to the chase.
Paying the bills. All right. Well then, so in between all that, with my business partner, there was a lot of, as I said, partying going on, and I was no stranger to having a good time. I mean, the one thing that rock and roll and porn have in common is having a good time, and the parties, the girls, it's all the same kind of thing. And the girls love the ex-rocker dude who's now a pornographer, who's got a mountain of drugs in his office. And so, we were doing it, and I was getting lost, losing focus, finding myself doing more drugs than work. specifically having a really, really tough time with speed.
Okay.
If you want to,
Oh yeah. But you've held up though. I mean, for someone who's like partied and you've pretty much seen it all, done it all twice. There are a lot of other people out there who look worse.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But I mean, I feel it. I've had some unfortunate health issues that I'm living with now from the heavy days, the drugs, it was always lightweight in Hollywood, which seems weird, right? Because we're living in Hollywood, a little Coke here and there and some beers at the whiskey and we're off and running, But once we hit the road and we were meeting people out on the road that had some serious offerings, it got crazy. And I remember coming off the road when it was all over, stepping back a bit, the need to have the drugs. It was either the need to be out entertaining people on the road, because that was my favorite part of it.
Because that's a drug in and of itself.
It was nothing can compare to it. And I'm sure all of your guests who are musicians would tell you that. It's entertaining an audience who's singing back to you with big smiles on their faces and fists in the air and the passion in their faces and in the way that they enjoy your music right back at me was incredible. So not having that, well, I could easily access the drugs to mask what I was missing. And that's really, and my depression, all that kind of, you can see where that's going. And so I never really stopped the drugs, yet I somehow managed to get jobs and continue working. I guess you could call me a drug addict that somehow maintained my life and my lifestyle without anybody really knowing, unless you were real close to me. And I can't believe I'm saying this right now on your show.
Well, I like to, I know you probably, in prepping for this podcast, thought I was just going to ask you about Gazzarri's and, I don't want you to hit areas you're uncomfortable talking about, but this is about life too.
Yeah. Yeah. And all these things just piled on, and I was running this operation and having a great time. And ultimately, I met a woman, again, I was single throughout all that period. I met a woman and, she pretty much changed my life. She was having her own drug problems, and we decided to leave LA there, because I don't know if you've ever had a problem like that, or when you're surrounded by everybody that is doing it, and everybody that wants it from you or expects that you're going to be doing it with them, you can't get away from it. Even if you quit, I quit 100 times, and then when you find yourself back in that room again and they're all having a good time, or what it seemed to be, it's hard. So we left California. I went back east where her family's from. I guess you could call it some sort of rehab. It went on for about a year. We got married. And while I was away, just when I was hitting my breaking point, losing my mind, living in a snowy tundra. I'm from Los Angeles, so being in the snow was like miserable for me. Although I thought it was going to be really cool, but 9 months later, the snow's just over the top of the windowsill. It's ridiculous. But I got the call from Hustler, from Larry Flint, to come run his production studio. And it was like, oh my God, this is like a miracle, They knew that I had the studio. They were one of my biggest clients at the time. And so I got a nice call from one of the executives over there, said, come and run this thing, come and produce our films for us. And we packed it up and came back to Los Angeles. Didn't call anybody we used to know. Sort of dropped out, stayed hidden, moved it into the north end of the LA County area, up, way out of LA proper, you know what I mean? And I drove to work every morning kind of quietly until I felt like I was in control of my life again. And I've been with Hustler for 10 years.
And like, I assimilate porn to almost like guitar solos in the mid 80s. Do you find, Like, you know, you had Eddie Van Halen. It's like, well, Steve Stevens, he can do what he does. And then Vinnie Vincent, try and outdo Steve Stevens. I mean, in porn, is there a conscious effort to see what's going on and try and outdo, like, okay, well, that guy did a double anal film. We got to do a triple anal. You know, I mean, because I don't watch porn, to be honest with you.
Oh, come on.
I really don't. And can I tell you, I've never had a drug or drink in my life.
Come on.
Never. I'm a weird guy.
I'm out of here. I'm leaving. This is over. I can't talk to you like this.
Okay, if you're leaving, can we at least do a duet of Kiss This Love Goodbye? I'll start. No. But I just, for me, I just don't like the close-ups in porn. You know, 5 minutes after a Lexington Steel video.
Wait a minute.
I know the actors.
Right.
I can't look at a girl's vagina after 5 minutes with Mr. Steele, because then it looks like that thing Boba Fett fell into. It's just, I'm not a graphic guy.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you. I've been so, oh my gosh. I mean, if you can think about the amount of porn I've seen in live and in person and up in my face and all of that stuff, none of that affects me anymore. And certainly if you're asking me if we're trying to beat the guy down the street with the kind of porn he's shooting, we're all really competitive. It's always been that way. I was competitive when I was shooting it for myself, and I certainly have to be competitive when I'm producing it for the king of porn. Let's face it, you know. So you know, because Larry Flint is 73, maybe 72, I think. He's still extremely active within the company, and he watches what we do, and he's criticizes everything. And so I have to make sure that our stuff looks as good as or better than everybody else's. And it's not an easy thing to do. You know, it's not easy because at some point it just becomes gross. Well, and not sexy and bizarre. And that's not the kind of stuff that he wants. I mean, I'll never forget.
I love it.
I was putting, is this explicit, by the way?
I mean, you know, I try, you can say whatever you want. I don't try and go dirty, but.
Yeah, I won't do that.
No, please. I want you to. Listen, it's given the subject matter. It's like when President Obama said the N-word on Mark Maron's podcast, it fit the topic they were talking about. So no restrictions here.
Okay. I was putting together, because part of my job isn't just to produce the films, because as my official title is creative director. And so what we do over there is I'm also the one that designs the covers, the DVD covers, any artwork, posters, anything that's going on visually across the board for the company outside of the magazine. I'm the one who oversees all of it. So, you know, getting into competition, you know, typically a DVD cover is a very soft cover, you know, something that's like a pretty girl, maybe your boobs are out or something sexy, right? You know, and you flip that damn thing over and oh my God, there's things on there that are typically a lot more graphic, right? I mean, for a guy who's never seen porn before, you know what I'm saying.
I mean, no, don't get me wrong, Drew. I've seen it.
Yeah.
I'm just not a
fan.
I can't look at some guy's foot long dick and I can't relate to that.
Yeah. And for me, my job is to find the guy with a foot long dick.
Well, they're out there.
Yeah. So you can email Earl if you want a gig at Hustler and you got a foot long dick.
That's eskakel@aol.com. I get a commission, right?
Of course.
Because I thought I had a pretty big dick. You know, comics like to take dick pics of themselves and show it to younger female comics just to, you know, I don't know, gain favor with them. And like every girl would say, God, Earl, you got a pretty big dick. And then I saw a Lexington Steel video and I'm like, I don't got a big dick.
Yeah, that's a freaking nature.
But there's a guy named
out there like that.
Castro.
Yeah.
If just Google Castro. I get you'd have to put Castro porn or Fidel Castro comes up. And if you think you got a big dick and you look at his pic, you don't got a big dick.
Right. Yeah. And so we try to outdo some of the other guys, and the graphics can get pretty gross. And And Larry called me and he said, this is starting to look like roast beef on the back, and I can't tell what I'm looking at anymore. And these were pretty much looking inside the body cavity, and it gets outrageous, and you have to tail it back, but at some point, I've put on the blinders and I'm making good product for what that is. It's getting tough to deal with. I've got 2 daughters. One of them's a 2-year-old and I have a 7-year-old, almost 7. And I don't want them coming home one day asking me more specifically what I do when they have a way to really, figure that out. And I don't want to have to lie to them. So there has to be some changes moving forward in my life as well. I feel like I've run the gamut on that part of my life, and that chapter in that book is coming to an end, I hope, but
is it hard to walk away from? I mean, the money is, I guess, I'm guessing, decent is
the money's, but it's what I've been doing it for so long, I can, on the back of my hand, it's so easy. And I not only that, it's an industry that's, I know so well. I know everybody, you mentioned Ron, it's a good friend. And, I know everybody, and I know how the industry works inside and out. And so it's certainly would have to be a major career change to walk away from it,
Well,
different, maybe on the more on the mainstream side of things, but it's not easy when your resume is marked with 15 years as a pornographer to try and now go make, Disney's next film.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine it would be almost like, you walk into a music meeting in the mid 90s. It's like, oh, you're the singer from Wild Side. And now you walk in to say, I don't know, a meeting with Michael Bay, and he looks at your last 15 films. It's like, oh, you produced Take It in the Ass 17. Well, you had me at 1.
Right.
But
yeah, you're right. So I got to own it. And I have for a really long time. I'm not ashamed of it. Actually, it's, done wonders for my family, for my security, for, the homes we've purchased and the lifestyle that we live. It's pretty cool, So, but, again, I read these YouTube notes, people watch our videos that are out there. Some people have made their own videos of clips they have of us, Wild Side, and then always somewhere in there it says, yeah, too bad the guy does porn now, or, he's a disgusting pornographer. Yeah, I am. There I am. Sorry. There's nothing I can say about that. But
well, I learned a long time ago not to read YouTube comments.
Yeah, they get pretty brutal.
Well, my newest obsession is this show on TV called Air Disasters. And what they do is I have a fear of flying, so I thought, if I watch this show and understand why planes crash, I'll get over it. And there was this, basically they reenact the crash in graphic form, and then they have actors do voiceovers of the, what was going on in the cockpit. And there was this one crash where a fire truck was in the, the runway, and the plane hit it and flies off into a building, and the pilots burn alive. And you hear the co-pilot say, Steve, my skin, it's falling off. I'm dying. So that, wow, I'm so macabre. I remember watching Faces of Death. Like, I got to hear the actual cockpit recording. So I go on YouTube, find the actual recording, and you hear the guy say, I'm dying, I'm burning alive. And the first comment was a guy who just said, pussies. Like,
yeah.
And then the second comment was a guy calling the first guy a faggot. And then the third comment was literally a guy who just said the N-word. Like, it had nothing to do, neither pilot was black.
Right.
So it's like, that was like, if you're anyone out there, whether you're a singer from an 80s band, a comic, if you think you're great, put up a video of your best 5 minutes on YouTube and just read the first page of comments.
Yeah, no, it's brutal. It's there's a lot of really nice things people have said, and I've tried to keep that closer to me than the awful stuff or the negativity. But in general, I think that Wild Side was received pretty well. People like the music, like the songs. You can still get the stuff on eBay for about 25, $30. Whereas, because it's out of print.
But there's a box set out, the Wasted Years, I think.
It's just a special of music from the demos and some of the unreleased music. You know, it's not really a box set, but it's a lot of music all slammed into one CD. So yeah, that was something that was put together by an old friend, Steve Rochelle from Tough. He's got that label.
Oh, absolutely.
RLS Records, and he's got a lot of stuff that he's constantly killing me with in his ads every 5 minutes.
Well, full disclosure, I advertise on Metal Sludge. It's metalsludge.tv. And if you go on there, you'll find about 48 banner ads for Tough CDs.
Yeah.
And Inappropriate Earl banner ad. But they can, so there's not a website that they go to and get Wildside CDs, but they can go on Stevie's.
They can go there. They can go, all the, it's everywhere. It's anywhere digital download, streaming, all this. iTunes, yeah. There's like 3 records on iTunes, and there's.
And do you get money from these things? I mean, I want to direct people to these things, but
I would like to say that I bought my first house with all that money, but I probably couldn't tell you that I bought my first bag of groceries with it. It's not like I'm getting rich.
But you furnished the house with the porn money.
The house that porn built.
Now, what if you put like Wildside, like maybe during a nice girl on girl scene, I'll put my porn cap on, and you had Kiss This Love Goodbye playing in the background, which, by the way, I cried when I heard that song.
Is that right? Seriously?
Absolutely. That and Just Another Night reminded me of a girl who broke up with me. And the lyrics of those 2 songs, I'm not trying to kiss your ass, man. I'm a big fan of those 2 songs.
Yeah, they were. Well, then I guess I did my job, right? I'm supposed to make you cry.
Well, yeah, I mean,
or at least tap into some emotion.
Were those 2 songs about a particular female? It seemed. I mean, they had such a specific voice. Do you remember if either song was about someone who maybe broke your heart?
Probably. I mean, at the time, I was this sort of, nothing can break my heart kind of guy, but absolutely it came from somewhere like that. So I'd say, yeah, for sure. More specifically, I remember there's a song called How Many Lies on the album that was about a girl who lived in the apartment complex that we had in Hollywood. So if you listen to the lyrics on that, it's about her. And Hang On Lucy, if you're a big fan, everybody knows that's about a hooker down on Yucca and Wilcox that we would run into in front of the Playboy Liquor every night. We'd go down there for booze on a writing session in the middle of the night. And so there were lots of songs that were written about characters or events that were happening to us. So when they said, go write with Paul Stanley, okay, I had nothing to do. I didn't write a single lyric on Clock Strikes. I went and met with Paul Stanley, who was friends with our manager at the time. Barry Levine managed the band, and Barry was a rock photographer, a very famous rock photographer. And he had shot all those famous Kiss images. And so, he called up Paul and said, listen, the label says my guys need more songs. And they sort of seem to be writing the same kind of thing. So maybe you can put something together. And at the time, Paul was kind of on a break from Kiss and was looking to expand his sort of publishing of music. Not necessarily tied to Gene, his own thing. And so he was down to write with us. And we went up to this I remember going up there on Christmas Eve to this big, crazy mansion house, beautiful house. And we get up there and he's renting it for the winter while he's in LA. And I was just starstruck, sitting in this little room. We had this massive home. We walk through all these hallways. We come down the hall and we come into a room that's like the size of a closet. And that's where he's got his guitar and plugged in a little amp. We sit down and and he's got a couple of ideas. He plays a few riffs. Him and Brent start hitting it off. It was Brent, myself, and Paul. And I sort of felt like I was out of it. Like he had the lyrical content already. He had a riff. Brent jumped in, and they were going. And I just sort of pulled myself out of it with somewhat of a screw this, man.
Right.
You know, I'm not part of this thing, man. So I left. They spent the rest of the week working on the song, and then they brought it to me with Paul's vocals on it. I wish I still had that demo, but Paul kind of singing along, getting me through the melody of what it should be. I changed it slightly, took it up into a higher register that I was used to singing where he wasn't, and then we recorded it. But I remember singing that song 100 times, and every time I sang it, I knew that it was a song I would never say those words in my life. I would never talk about when the clock strikes 12, I'm going to bone you tonight kind of tune. That's what the song was. It was basically about, you know, banging a chick at midnight and you're going to love my, you know, and the lyrics were just
80s cheese.
Kiss.
Well, I mean,
And
Kiss.
I'm as much, you can't take anything away from their super mega success. I mean, Kiss is amazing. And I'm a big fan of old Kiss. A lot of people are. The early Kiss stuff is what I should say. And not so much where they were going and where they are. But and I felt like that song fit more in the genre of where they were going and not Love Gun, which I love. That's just the greatest song ever. And I just love that style of their music for them. And so I had a hard time singing that song every night, but the fans loved it, man. It just connected. The guy was like, well, there must be something right here because everybody loves this song. And I think I released a live version of it somewhere. It's out there on iTunes. It's pretty cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can hear a live version at some big venue we played. So, and that was, but you know, and the same thing with Jim Valance for me. It was really hard to write with someone. And if you listen, here's an interesting thing. If you listen to that song, which is called Monkey See, Monkey Do, which by the way, again, not a title I would ever make, not a lyric that I would, you know, like there was a lot of influence by Jim. And Jim, as you pointed out, was a real hit maker for
Bryan Adams.
Brian was really one of his first big hit makers, and then he went on to.
I want to say Survivor, but I might. I know
think so. He wrote with Heart. I mean, if you look at his discography of work, it's insane of what he's done. But the drum beat, the music, the whole song sounds like it could fall in line with an Aerosmith tune. And if Steven Tyler jumped in and sang that in his style, it could be an Aerosmith song. And that's what bugged me about that song most. Just wasn't true to us, but yet we were being forced to write music so that the label could have what they were hoping for, which was just another hit, you know, and where I thought the record was ready, you know, but they didn't.
I mean, like you said with Paul Stanley, you kind of went in, not necessarily a shell, but like, was it intimidating to?
It probably had a lot to do with it, intimidation, but not because of him. He was super cool. In fact, that next spring, we all went to the Jersey Shore to a big house that I don't even know why we were there. We're partying actually it was next summer, and Paul showed up there with a bunch of his rock and roll buddies and spent the week with us out at this massive home where everyone was in different rooms out on the beach, and we were hanging with Paul Stanley all week long. And so for us, we spent the summer recording at Eddie Van Halen's house with Ed right there, Wolfie hanging in a Bjorn. You know, one of those baby Bjorns right in front of him while he's smoking, by the way. Valerie screaming at him from the house up at the studio to stop smoking.
Which he did not.
I could tell you some shit, man. I mean, you know.
Well, I mean, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I mean, listen, let's, I mean,
we were having a good time, and so was Ed. And let me tell you, the coke was flying, the party was on. We had Andy Johns, the biggest booze hound, heroin junkie, fucked up dude in the world. We're talking British party animal who had recorded the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and
Cinderella,
just finished Van Halen, did Cinderella. I mean, this guy was a legend, and now he's going to record these Hollywood little punky assholes who think that they're something special. And we had some learning to do, and we did. We learned a lot from Andy, although I went head-to-head with him so many times because I was so frustrated with a guy who was 15 minutes in the studio and a half a bottle of vodka already gone and just sloshed all over the board, couldn't record anything at that point. And he was also engineering the project in many days, so he's having to operate the mixing console while I'm singing in the booth and missing great tracks and just drunk, and Ed drunk with him, and just like it was a disaster.
Because weren't you guys the only band at that time other than Van Halen to use his facilities?
Yeah, we were, and may still be, unless his son has brought in groups, I'm sure, but still we were the only. And I'll tell you a really, really interesting story. So fast forward years and years later, I'm sitting in my big shot executive office up on La Cienega in Wilshire.
I've been in that office.
I'm up on the fourth floor. I got a panoramic view all the way to Century City with this big office. And I get a call from one of my producers, and it's a crazy story. She's a transgender.
Hey, whatever.
Okay. And real cool, but 6'6" with a big 8-inch Adam's apple on her and big basketball hands.
8-inch Adam's apple or dick?
Adam's apple.
All right.
You know what I mean? Like,
I do.
Clearly, at one point, she was a man, but has been living as a woman for a really long time.
All right.
She's producing some adult films and has this incredible production idea and wants to talk to me about it. So she comes in and sells me on this idea and says, oh, and by the way, Eddie Van Halen's going to do the music score. I said, what? For an adult film? Oh, yeah. So I later find out that she's bringing porn chicks up to Ed's place, and this is when he's not with Valerie. There was, everyone knows this by now, a time when Ed was like this reclusive, sort of up at his house, not going anywhere, no teeth, looked like a zombie. I don't know if you ever saw the images of him.
Oh yeah, I mean,
really bad. So
it was pretty rough.
He's going through a lot of shit, and no real Van Halen music happening at the time. Lots of fighting with him and Sammy and all that stuff. And I guess he somehow connected with this producer friend of mine and agreed to do some music for one of these big budgeted adult films. So I said, you know what? Tell Ed to call me, and I want to talk to him about this thing. If evidently he was putting up the money for the movie too, as long as they were bringing him the girls. And so I get the call, and he comes to the Hustler production offices with her, and I'm not who he would remember in a million years, because I mean, very different looking and obviously in a different world. And, guy meets a billion people. How's he going to remember me? But so what I did to spark a memory was say to him, I was in this band, and I don't know if you remember, we recorded our record with Andy Johns at your house. We did all these, we were up there for like 3 months, And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, no one's ever recorded at my house except for me and my band, Van Halen. And so I looked over at this chick producer and I said, no, man, you got to remember it was 91, Andy Johns, You guys were just about to embark on a huge tour, going out with Alice in Chains supporting you, and it was that whole, Carnal Knowledge record. I was trying to, jog the guy's memory, and he straight up looked me right in the face and said again, no one's ever recorded anything at my studio except for Van Halen. So now I look like an asshole in front of, this girl, and ultimately was never able to convince him of the story. And I don't know if he doesn't remember or if he simply was being typical Eddie Van Halen, which is, in my opinion, a jerk.
Well, I've heard that about him.
Oh, my God.
But
I got nothing to lose by saying he's an asshole.
Well, I mean, it seems to be, he just did a interview where he kind of badmouthed David Lee Roth. And of course,
he's the only guy in the world he is so, I've never met an ego like this in my life. He pulled me aside one day. We were recording vocals. Again, he's half drunk. He pulls me out of the vocal booth and he says to me, "Hey man, so come and listen to your track. Just like you would imagine Eddie Van Halen to do it. Really cool." And I'm idolizing the guy. Remember, this is like, for me, let's see, this was 91. So 86, 88, 80, 10 years earlier, actually, 83, 82, 81. I was standing in line, all night to make sure I had a good spot for festival seating to go see Van Halen. They were like my heroes, So now I'm at the gate buzzing in to go record in his studio. So I was really like tripping. I was at Eddie Van Halen's house. We were flipping. We had strict orders by his team that we couldn't bring guests. We weren't allowed to tell anybody. It was this whole big thing. It was really hard to do because, you want to tell everybody about it. But he pulls me out of this vocal booth and he says, "I want you to listen to this track." And I forget which song it was. And he goes, "You're screaming a lot. You hear you screaming?" I'm like, "Yeah, but that's how the song, that's what our thing was." And he was like, nah. He goes, no, put on this other track. And they rewind a bunch of stuff and he puts it on. I think it was Looks Like Love. And there was a lot more singing involved. And so he says, "This is much better. You should do this. You should sing like this. This is going to get you so much further if you sing rather than scream." So that was a really an important moment for me in listening to him about my voice and what I could do with it and how it was not just always about screaming, And I looked up to that. 20 minutes later, I'm talking to him and he is basically ripping apart every single successful musician in the world, because I went through them all with him. I asked him what he thought about the current guys, Axl Rose. Oh my God, terrible. Always about Axl Rose, never about Guns N' Roses.
You might be right on that.
Well, definitely, but let's face it, the guy's voice came out of nowhere and just killed. And I wasn't really asking him about his personality, but rather the record itself, which was incredible, Same thing about Sebastian Bach. He didn't know too much about Skid Row, but he thought the guy was terrible. Jimi Hendrix, overrated. From every genre and every era, decade after decade, everyone sucked. I tried to get into it with him on David Lee Roth, and he just didn't have a whole lot to say about it at the time. Of course, he is now, and he always has years later. But just not, in my opinion, not a guy that really liked anybody but himself.
Which is too bad, because just like, I'm a huge fan, and Wolfie's a pretty good bass player for a 20-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. Michael Anthony's been playing bass almost double the amount of time Wolfie's been alive. So it's not the same. And, I don't know. I saw him at Staples Center a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I was there.
It's Kool and the Gang.
Yeah, I saw it.
I thought Kool and the Gang, I've been to thousands of concerts. That probably was the best received opening act I've ever seen. I mean, you kind of forget how many hits they had.
But that's a typical Van Halen move, is to put something completely out of their genre. They used to do that back in the 80s. You know, who is this? I don't know. I remember seeing Van Halen, and the Knack opened for Van Halen.
Oh, they're amazing.
But they were awesome. But Van Halen didn't get it. They thought they were bad, so we'll put these bad guys up in front of us, you know. And I just think that the brothers, both the same, by the way, asshole 1 and 2, have an allegiance to each other, and you got to respect that. I mean, I guess, you know, there's this love for their family, and they put their youngest Van Halen in there to really, you know, make that a solid Van Halen name. I don't know, man. It's a terrible story about what happened with Michael Anthony, and of course, you know, thank God for Sammy to try and set things straight every once in a while.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when Sammy's the voice of reason, it's a really wacky world. And David Lee Roth has started to, you know, I think when they did that MTV awards show in the mid '90s, and I think they were testing the waters to see if David could come back and behave himself, and he was a little exuberant. You know, now, you know, 15 years later, he's coming off the best guy in the band, like in terms of like, oh, he's just nice guy, shaved head now, and Japanese body tattoos. It's not the David Lee Roth I, you know, really remember, you know, but it's like,
no,
I hate it as a fan. I hate it when, you know, guys like Van Halen, you know, he was shitting on Michael Anthony the other day, saying he had to teach him all his bass parts, and it's like, I don't want to hear about it. It's like, you know, Gene and Paul, you know, when they talk about Kiss and Ace and Peter, you know, can't you guys just, at least for the fans, act like you like each other?
Really? He said that?
Yeah.
That's awful.
Like, I can't critique anyone's musicianship because I don't play any instruments, but I have a hard time believing you had to teach Michael Anthony bass parts. He's a pretty accomplished bass player.
Oh, maybe he was referring to something like when they first got together, but I mean, I can't imagine that being something they did down the road after albums and albums and albums together. I mean,
But he was referring to like down the road, like, you know, I think he was trying to build Wolfie up, and, you know, Wolfie, you know, for a 20-year-old is amazing, but, you know, I just, you know, but, you know, I like the Vinnie Vincent era of Kiss, so what the hell do I know? You know, I always seem to like a band's worst era, like, or I shouldn't say worst era, but like least popular era. Like, you know, my favorite Alice Cooper era is
Vinnie Vincent was without the makeup, right?
Well, he was actually the last original makeup member of Kiss. He was the Egyptian warrior.
Right.
He had the gold ankh on his face,
right?
And he was. I have like a mild obsession with him just because he's like the Howard Hughes of music. Like, you know, he's kicked out of Kiss 3 times in 2 years, but they kept bringing him back because he was good at what he did.
Right, yeah.
And then he's kicked out of the Vinnie Vincent Invasion. I mean, that seems, like, and then Slaughter basically was the Vinnie Vincent Invasion.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems impossible. Like, you know, I don't know.
His name is the name of the group.
Like,
and then
he got invaded.
Yeah, it was probably the bass player's idea on that one.
But yeah, Dana Strum, the great Dana Strum. He's. Do you have any good Dana Strum?
Businessman of hair bands. He was like the actually a really smart guy.
He's like the poor man's.
I can't say anything negative. I mean, every move he made for that Slaughter thing was the right move. So
He's like I like to say he's like the poor man's Gene Simmons. Like,
right.
You know, he is like the B level version of Gene, and I mean that. Yeah, I'm a fan of Slaughter.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I think he's responsible for getting Jakey Lee the Aussie gig. So you know, he's always got his fingers in the Mets.
Sure.
And you know, I think Slaughter still tours to a degree. So
they do. Yeah.
But you know, this is the part. True. I mean, we could talk all day.
Yeah.
I mean, Van Halen stories. You know.
Yeah. Well, as you know, I was just getting to was that I don't. You know, music is not what it was for me back then. You know, for me it was everything. up all night, everything, writing music all night long. Didn't matter what. At one point, we had management before the record label, and it was, we'll pay your bills if you write music. And that's all we did. We just wrote music and lived to play the clubs in Hollywood. And we did a reunion show, probably the first time we got together with Brent Woods, the original lineup, minus the rhythm guitar player who doesn't live in the States.
Is it Sandy Simon?
No, that's Benny Rindance. And he wasn't around for it. And so we just did it as a 4-piece, and we got together after about 10 years of not playing together and did a show in Salt Lake City. Some promoter called us and offered us ridiculous money to come there and do a couple nights. And so we went and did some place, and the response was amazing. It was really good. It was fun. I can't say that I could sing those songs the way I used to sing them, because when you don't sing that kind of thing that way for as long as I certainly didn't have that voice. And you know, you get older, your voice changes, things change. And so
gets deeper, or
I think it gets deeper, and it's not exercised in the right way. And I hear some of these guys still doing it today, and they've been doing it every day. And so they're able to hang on. They don't quite sound the same, but they're able to hit those notes. You know, the tone in their voices are different, but they're still able to do it. And I really think that's great. But I was out of practice, but we did it. It was great. And then a couple of years later, we did the Roxy. I think it was 07, maybe 08. Sold it out, had a great time, had a lot of memory. And it's funny, I was standing behind the curtain, and this is it really woke me up. First of all, just the whole idea of promoters running around telling you what time you got to be on. I'm up in this stinky, sticky, gross dressing room at the Roxy with stickers of every band from 20 years up there. It's just really not my scene anymore. And I'm up there with my wife and trying to get drunk so I can go out there and do this thing. The place is packed. I'm a little nervous. It's a Hollywood gig, you know, and we hadn't played on that stage in probably 15 years, you know. And so, but I walked out onto the stage, and the curtain was still closed before they, you know, did the big, you know, wild side, you know, and opened the curtain. And these girls, who were no longer like girls anymore, they were older women, stuck their heads up underneath the curtain and were looking around to see, watching roadies run around and people trying to get the set ready. And I'm standing there looking around, making sure things are working for me. And the girl taps me on the foot and she goes, "Hey, do you know where Drew is?" And I said, "I'm sorry, what?" And she said, "Do you know where Drew is?" And I said, "I'm Drew." And she looked at me like she had just looked at this monster, because all of her fantasies and all of her memories and all of her whatever she was thinking I looked like still was shattered instantly. Because I mean, you know,
just look different.
I just look different. I don't have long, beautiful blonde hair down to my butt. I'm not wearing white cowboy boots with spurs on it, and you know, some flowing weird outfit, you know,
the pirate shirt.
Yeah, you know, I'm just kind of standing there in a black t-shirt and some jeans and some boots, and my hair is all cut off and dark, and I'm wearing some shades, and I'm ready to do a show, and really focused on what I'm going to sing and how I'm going to sing it. And she was really kind of destroyed, and she went, "Nuh-uh." And I said, "Yeah." And then she just put her head back underneath the curtain. And then I looked for them when the curtain opened up, and they were not at the edge of the stage anymore. So it was a real sort of like, wow, do I really want this in my life? Do I care about all this? And the anxiety on the level of doing that show and just back in Hollywood again. I just, it's not for me anymore. I don't care for it.
Yeah, I mean, do you really want to hang out with girls who are probably doing blow with Happening Harry and Victor the Snake Man?
They were all there, man. They were all there, only they were 25 years older.
Well, there's a thing also called gravity that these girls don't realize when they're wearing those tube tops from the
Yeah.
Under the Influence tour.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Drew, I mean, there's a million questions, but like I told you when we started, I want people to want to go. I want to hear more. Well, guess what? You're going to have to turn in for volume 2. Where can people find you? Or do you want people to find you? Do you have like Twitter or Facebook, or like if they want to buy some of your films, or not your films, but you know?
I don't want to promote adult, stuff.
No worries.
It sells itself, and I'm sure if people are interested in that, they can find Hustler. If they've never heard of Hustler, then you're living in a cave somewhere. Yeah. But as far as finding me in terms of the regular world, they can go to there's a Wild Side Twitter page.
Okay.
There's actually a couple of them. I run one of them. I think one of the guitar players runs one. I don't really care.
What's the one you run, at Wild Side, or?
I can't even remember. It's not something I'm on every day, but I'll tell you 1 second here. It's at Official Wild Side 2014. It hasn't been up that long, but at Official, actually it's just at Official Wild Side, not even the 2014. So just at Official Wild Side is the Twitter account. And I'll put up some classic stuff every couple of weeks, some videos. I'm editing a bunch of really cool we documented the entire tour with an old Super 8. And so I'm going through it all now. It's all been digitized, and I'm cutting all the stuff on the bus, on the road, backstage, everything you could think of, and I'm putting a bunch of videos together with it. And it's pretty cool.
So go on iTunes. Wild Side's well represented there. But before you go, I just have one final question.
Yeah.
Under the Influence, one of my favorite, I don't want to say forgotten gems, but CD that should have been bigger. What did the album cover mean?
What did it what?
What did the album cover mean? I mean, there's a little, it looks like a 13, 14-year-old girl. And that's just, before you give me that answer, back then, Winger had a hit song, She's Only 17. Before that, you had Kiss, Christine 16. I mean, it was kind of a different era. I don't know if an album cover like that could fly in this day and age. Did it have am I reading too much into it? Because then there's a girl in the background as well. It looks like she's just sunbathing.
Well, no. So what this album cover represented for us was that we lived in Hollywood, and it seemed to us that everything in Hollywood was influenced by something related to this city. Los Angeles and Hollywood. Everybody was either wearing it, smoking it, eating it, and living a lifestyle that they were somewhat influenced by, something they saw and they want to be just like. And I suppose a lot of that you can hear on that song Monkey See, Monkey Do. But as far as the photo goes, this was a photo of a young girl. You're right. She's 10, 11, 12. And we dressed her up to represent everything that was LA or Hollywood, in our opinion. A big fancy backyard with a beautiful swimming pool. She's barely wearing anything, tons of makeup, big smoke in her hand. And behind her is her little brother, actually, laying in a lounge chair with a cell phone, smoking a cigar, reading the Wall Street Journal, sort of influenced by that side of things. And it just, that's where the title Under the Influence comes from. It's not necessarily influenced by one particular thing, drugs or whatever, but rather all of it. And I look at that record and I think it's pretty cool. It's like an art piece because it reminds me of a classic album cover, something you might see on a Supertramp cover or something of that era, rather than just us five guys looking with our fists in the air with a burning flame behind us, or what you would see typical of a lot of the hair bands at the time. There was something well thought out, produced, and expensive to shoot and put together, and that's what it is.
Well, that was like my bucket list question. I was like, I stared at this album cover for 24 years now. I thought there was like some deep hidden meaning behind it.
No, but if you rub it with a sponge, all the colors change on it.
Well, that's I don't really want to rub anything with a. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Drew, I can't thank you enough. I do hope you come back, and we'll get more. I feel like I want to do a 20 names with you, just from various people from the past. But I know you have a wife and two beautiful kids to get back to. In all seriousness, I thank you very much for doing this, because I'm a big fan of Wildside and the era in general. So, guys, go on Twitter, follow Wildside. But more importantly, buy their stuff on iTunes, and just follow Drew's whereabouts. And you know who I am, Inappropriate Earl, iTunes and SoundCloud. I got some guests I'm trying to get. We're trying to get the singer from King Cobra, but we can't find her. Notice I said her. It's a whole thing these days with Bruce Jenner, Caitlyn Jenner. Mark Free, Marcy Free, Mrs. Free, if you're out there, come on down. I'm in West Hollywood, so I'm sure you're familiar with the area. And Richard Black, stop running from me. I will find you. I'm just trying to get Shark Island some sales. And Drew Rose, you're the best. Thank you, Stevie Rochelle, for putting us together. And this will be out very soon. And support Wildside. Find Brent Woods. He's probably making business deals as we speak in the back of Vince Neil's, strip club in Vegas. So thank you guys very much for listening. You're going to love this interview. And we'll see you on iTunes and SoundCloud. Leave a review. I leave all the good and bad ones up. And we'll see you soon. Thank you, guys.